Hi, everyone. It's your friend, Dr. Teresa Peterson from Team Sarah Noel Wilson Inc., bringing to you the word of the week, which is vulnerability. We don't usually do a word of the week, but we've heard this word about 3 dozen times. So I just wanted to hop on and share it with you. Um, these are some of the ways we've heard people talking about vulnerability and really wrestling with vulnerability this week. We served a team a while back who struggled with what it would mean to be vulnerable as leaders in their organization. And what that meant for them was it was very vulnerable anytime they didn't immediately know an answer. That felt risky, that felt vulnerable to them. They were really worried that expressing vulnerability, which in that situation would be to say, I need more time to think about it. I don't know, or we've never solved this problem before. There was a big concern that that would diminish how their team members thought about them, that that would take a notch out of their credibility as leaders. And as we're digging in and unpacking this very adaptive challenge, this very sticky set of beliefs that they're holding, one of the things holding that belief in place was that they have a very perfectionist culture. They celebrate and promote knowing all the answers and knowing them immediately, and that they have cultivated within their organization that the role of the leader is to have all the answers, that that is what a leader does, as opposed to perhaps a more realistic, and we could call it vulnerable as well, way of showing up as a leader, which would be to help others grow their thinking, help mediate the thinking of others related to problem solving, model what to do when you don't know, validating that there are problems that are new and different because they work in a very dynamic environment where things change pretty quickly. So there is no shortage of new problems to solve. And so we explored together this idea of what would it look like to experiment with more vulnerability, to experiment with leaning into the times we don't know and how we might actually build the skills of the team more efficiently, more meaningfully in that cooperation, in that relationship of navigating times we don't know. So that was one way we heard folks talking about it. And a real shout out to everyone who maybe works in an environment or maybe grew up as a leader believing that the leader had to have all the answers, that you had to wear that mask of perfectionism, that mask of no doubt or never second guessing. And I'd invite you to consider what are the trade offs to a more vulnerable approach where you're more actively engaged in mentoring others and helping them develop not only what they know, but what to do when they don't know. And another way that we've been hearing vulnerability this week is from some leaders who are thinking about, very curious about how to lead with vulnerability or how much vulnerability is appropriate when you want to build trust quickly on a team. A couple folks had the idea of sharing a highly vulnerable story right away. And then there was some pushback in the group about what is it like to start a new partnership when you lead with a very vulnerable share. So, some perspectives that we worked through together. Um, some folks who you're trying to connect with might not receive that very vulnerable story in the same way as you telling it. There's also a risk that people might feel you're trying to manipulate them by sharing a highly vulnerable story for the purpose of a connection, right? That's a risk you can run. Um, Vulnerability is in the eye of the beholder. So, what feels really vulnerable to you to say, or might not feel that way for me to hear, or wouldn't be the same for me to share. But a loving push I would give if you're thinking about this role of vulnerability is that authenticity, when we think about the key role it plays in trust, authenticity is a beautiful gateway to vulnerability. So, when I'm showing folks who I really am, I'm showing up consistently. I'm helping folks understand who I am, how I process information, what it's like to partner with me. And then I lean into those moments to share. I've been in this situation before. Let me tell you about a time I got it really wrong. A situation where I struggled with what to do and how I worked through it. Those moments of vulnerability can be very powerful when they come from a very authentic place and at a good time in the relationship. Now, how long is a good time? Ah, magic question, right? For some folks, after just a few minutes of connecting, they might be ready for you to share a vulnerable story related to life or leadership. And for some folks, that might be weeks or months. And I've even had a few folks say, like, I don't know if I ever want to hear the story. But what I would invite you to consider is what is the purpose of sharing the story? Because if it is to make a connection, there are much more effective and kind of easy ways to start building connection early. Knowing that when vulnerability happens in the moments where it's going to resonate, in those moments where it feels very um, context appropriate, that would be a more meaningful use of vulnerability than sharing something significant up front. And sometimes we see a vulnerable share up front and then almost no vulnerability or empathy after that, right? So I would invite you to lead with your true self and be very real and very authentic in those moments as they arise. What comes up for you when you think about vulnerability? How do you define it? What was your reaction to hearing some of these ideas? Um, what else should we be thinking about? Just the collective we of humanity are related to making work and the workplace work better for humans. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email us anytime. Hello@sarahnoelwilson.com. As always, a pleasure, and I'll see you again soon, friends.